Hmm.
And many of us get saved, but we don't get loved. And you can't love until you've been loved. And then you can only love to the degree to which you have been loved. And Jesus said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And you're my friends.
Hey, look out. It's Faith Talk Today. I'm Rick Probst. Hope you are having a wonderful, it's probably hot out there. Thank God I'm in the office, but a wonderful weekend. This guest that we have on today, we've had him on the show many times, and I don't know how he does it, but he makes Christianity fun. And we're going to pick his brain this morning. I'm talking about Steve Brown. He's the host of Key Life, which you hear Monday through Friday at 10 here at Faith Talk Atlanta. We're going to talk about, I was watching one of his podcasts the other day, and he always reminds us that God's not mad at us. And still, which I'll talk to Steve in just a second about this, I'm not convinced. And it's not his theology, it's my head. And yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second. Hey, thank you so much for downloading all the Faith Talk Today podcasts. I don't understand this, Steve, but according to the metrics, we're off the chain. We're off the chart. A lot of folks watching and listening to the show. Obviously, it's the guest and not the host. But thank you so much. You can download this one as well as all the others at faithtalkatlanta.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Steve, there's so much to talk to you about, and I think I want to open up with telling folks, check out Steve's keylife.org. And by the way, every time I say keylife.org, I get 3 free sins according to Steve. And Steve has an amazing podcast. You'll want to hear it. You'll want to watch it. Always great guests. I was watching the William P. Young and Baxter Kruger one, talking about the book, The Shack, and The Shack Revisited. You've got to watch that. It might make you mad, but it might set you free. Who knows? But either way, it is a good podcast. First of all, Steve, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rick. You say it's hot in Atlanta. You ought to live in Florida. In the summer, when I preach on hell. And we titled the sermon, So You Think It's Hot Here.
That's funny. See what I mean? Steve Brown always making Christianity fun. Now, how did a boy from Asheville, North Carolina, end up in Florida? Well, we'll have to ask him that another time. But first of all, Steve, let's talk about this, because if you wind Steve Brown up, he basically says the same thing in different ways. Thank you very much. God's not mad at us. How come I can't get that in my skull, Steve? What is that?
Well, that's because you're so messed up. If you were ordained like me, you wouldn't have. Listen, we all feel that way. That came from a story. Michael, a Christian writer and singer, had a story about a girl who was kicked out of her house, and she was a party girl. She did bad things. And it was Michael Kelly Blanchard. And Michael loves to tell stories of grace. And he told me the background story of this song. And she was kicked out of her house. She worked in a factory. There was a guy in the factory with a big black Bible. And he told her that God was going to judge her, and she knew she deserved it. But she was staying at her grandmother's house. And in the chorus of the song, he sings that there's a picture of Jesus hanging on the wall, and he looks like he just seen a little girl fall, and he don't look angry at all. And that haunts me sometimes, because of the biblical teaching on imputation. That means that the righteousness of Christ has been given to me No matter what I do or where I go, I'm clothed in that righteousness, and I am justified by the blood of Christ, which means that God will never be angry at me again. Now, if we have people watching and listening who are not believers, you may have a problem. But if you belong to Christ, he's not mad at you, and he never will be. And once you get over that hump, and we all work at it all the time, Rick, I understand what you said. The reason I preach it is because I need it so much. But I'm reminded over and over again that I am welcomed, that I'm acceptable, and that I'm clothed in the righteousness of Christ. And that makes prayer different. It makes life different. It makes everything we do different. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a politician in Alabama this morning, and he was talking about how he always felt like he was on the outside looking in. I've always felt that way too. And but everything changes because you're on the inside, because God's not angry at you if you belong to him.
Steve Brown, host of Key Life. You can hear that here at Faith Talk Atlanta, 10 a.m. Check out his podcast and all the resources. If you watch YouTube, check it out. I love watching it, but you can listen to it as well. keylife.org. One of my favorite Steve Brown quotes: "You'll run out of sins before you run out of his grace."
Is that cool or what? That's not mine. That belongs to one of the voices of Key Life, Jerry Perry's, who is one of my dearest friends. He's an African-American pastor, and I'm obviously an old white guy. We love each other. We don't agree on a lot, but we agree on Jesus. And when I heard him say that, you'll run out of sin before God runs out of grace, I thought, that is so cool. I can live on that for a week.
Now, Steve, you mentioned something, and I've heard you say this before, so I want to ask you about it. You hang with, I mean, if you look at the list of folks, Andrew Farley, one of our favorite guests, you've talked to him a number of times. You know William P. Young, the author of The Shack, very, very well, and many others. You don't always agree with other folks' theology, yet you have a relationship with them. You know, I mean, how beautiful is that? But doesn't that sound foreign in the church?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, we talk about the canceled culture, and I hate it, but we've had a canceled culture forever.
Yes.
And if you don't agree, you know, everybody that belongs to Jesus belongs to everybody that belongs to Jesus. And I believe that. And so these people with whom I disagree, we were kidding off the air. And I said, I don't agree with Jesus all the time. I mean, I know he's right and I'm wrong. But you know, love is something that transcends that. And I love having people I disagree with on our broadcast. I try to be civil. Sometimes I'm not, but that's what Jesus told us to do. And in his prayer in John 17, that's what he prayed, that we would be one.
Yes.
So I'm a Calvinist, 5-point Presbyterian, and I wouldn't say you have to be a Presbyterian to go to heaven, but I wouldn't take a chance if I were you. but boy, the body of Christ is big, and that's a gift that God has given me because I was never that way. I don't draw so many lines as I used to because I know this is my brother and sister and I'm going to spend eternity with them. And I better get used to it now.
Love that. Steve Brown, host of Key Life, 10 a.m. Monday through Friday here at Faith Talk Atlanta, keylife.org. Check out the resources and the podcasts and also articles on there, some really cool articles. All right. we talk about the folks that that listen, and it's a wide range of denominations and mindsets that listen to the station, Faith Talk Atlanta, that listen to the show. Someone has, or some folks have heard your show, and it sounds great, but there's a big but there. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah, but Steve, but somebody that wants to move from lack of grace to a lifestyle of grace, it's not going to happen overnight, right?
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process. How does someone begin? Because sometimes it's not going to be family friendly or church friendly if we start changing in that sense, in that mode. How does one migrate, if you will, to a lifestyle of grace?
I think that God, I don't think you have to do anything. I think you have to let God love you. And many of us get saved, but we don't get loved. And you can't love until you've been loved. And then you can only love to the degree to which you have been loved. And Jesus said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And you're my friends. And once you allow that to happen, setting aside all of the issues that we all have and say, God, I'm not sure you love me. There's a great story about a guy who got irritated with God and went out and pitched a tent in the middle of the desert. And then God came and overwhelmed him. And he gets in front of his tent and starts dancing. And he says, God, tell me you love me. And God says, I love you. And then he says, tell me again you love me. And God says, I love you. And then he says, tell me why you love me. And there's this long silence. And God says, I don't know. There's something irrational about my love. And I think you need to go to Scripture to take it seriously and to go before the God who is manifested in Jesus Christ. Go to him and he doesn't need your help. Just say, let me experience your love. And it's a process, but someday you'll become a spiritual giant like me. And if you believe that, you believe anything.
Steve Brown, the host of Key Life, Faith Talk Atlanta, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Go to keylife.org. Listen to the podcast. What guests coming up? But when do you find out? Do you say, hey, guys, let's get such and such? Or do they say, Steve, your team, do they say, hey, Steve, I think we should talk to blah, blah, blah? Or do they surprise you the day of? How do you know what's going on?
No, it's usually planned a month or so in advance.
Okay. Yeah.
And Kathy Wyatt, who is on our staff here, is in charge of guests. And like you, Rick, when you started this thing, you had to hustle up guests. But as more people watch, more people want to be on. And so you get requests from publishers and authors and people. So it's not really hard to fill this thing. When you asked me to come on, I was flattered. And because I know you got a big audience. And besides, you have a great beard.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Real quick, I know we got the time's running out. We could spend all day with you, but you don't have that time. And we don't either, do we? Because we have other things that we have to do.
Yeah.
But do you have a book coming soon? What's coming up for Steve Brown pretty soon?
Well, I think there's a book coming out soon. The last book was Laughter and Lament. And the new book, if it comes out, I finished the manuscript, is a book about regret and shame and guilt and fear.
Oh my!
Lies that Christians believe, and it will be one of the truly great books of Christendom. if I can get somebody to publish it. Rick, you're fun. I love being on with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate you. We love you. We really, really do. Key Life with Steve Brown, 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. Go to keylife.org. Check out the resources. You got to hear and watch the podcasts. They are amazing. Hey, thank you so much, speaking of podcasts, for downloading ours. You have, we can tell. I don't know how we can tell, but they tell me that we can tell that you're downloading them. So thank you very much. You can get this one as well as all the others at faithtalkatlanta.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Steve Brown. And hey, next week we've got another great guest. So join us. Have a great week. I'm Rick Probst. This is Faith Talk Today. See ya.